It must be fall because a new Shalimar flanker is in town. Here we've got Shalimar Millésime Jasmin. I'll start by saying I'm not the biggest fan of Shalimar, although I respect it and I think it's fantastic composition. It's not really my style, and I don't own original Shalimar, although I have smelled it. Last year, I rushed to the store to try Shalimar Iris because I'm a big Iris fan. And at first I was a little disappointed by its overly caramelized sweetness, but I must say by the end of winter it won me over, and when I saw it popping up on the QVC of all places, including a free Shalimar lotion and a 15% off coupon, I couldn't resist, and I ended up buying Shalimar Iris last winter. Sort of my guilty pleasure. I figured I don't have many really sweet fragrances, and there is something a little warm and addictive about that, especially in the depths of winter. So this year I kind of had my ears perked up when I heard that it would be Jasmin, as I'm a big fan of Jasmin, and in my mind I thought the kind of potentially heavy, dense complexity of Shalimar lightened up with sort of like a pretty floral green jasmine could be really beautiful. Of course, this is just me projecting on what I would like the fragrance to be. So I had the Guerlain counter hold one for me at Saks and bought it right away. I've got to say, overall, I am actually a bit disappointed, although not so much that I regret the purchase. I usually don't like to reference other reviewers because I don't know who's watched what, but I have to say that I watched Persolet's talk about this one day before I got my bottle, and very interestingly, he said that he didn't like the opening, but he was won over by the dry down, that kind of experience where you keep thinking, oh, what's that? And you keep coming back to it, and the dry down kind of wins you over. I bring that up to say I've had nearly the exact opposite experience. And that's not to say one of us is right and the other is wrong, but just to kind of point out the subjectivity of perfume. I actually find the opening the best part. It's got a little bit of that greenness that I enjoy in Jasmin, a green, fresh note, and I detect a little bit of that sort of Shalimar leather in the opening, I suppose mingling with Jasmin, although I must say nothing here pops out as Jasmin to me. There's like a lightly floral tone to this, but I find the opening the best part. What disappoints me about the dry down, although it is a cozy, lively, lovely dry down, is that it seems very, very simple and a bit boring to me. Most of the dry down to me is just quite a musky, fluffy fit thing. It begins to go quite sweet, although not as sweet as Shalimar Iris. Here it's like the sugar is like a perfectly clear crystallized sugar. There's this dessert, I believe it's a Korean dessert with fruit on a stick that's sort of glazed in this like crystal clear, see-through, shiny sugar. And I sort of get that impression in comparison to Shalimar Iris's burnt, dark, deep caramel. Now this musky dry down had made me think of a couple other things, and it's always nice to test when you have a hunch and see if you're right. And I thought, you know, for people mourning Tonka Imperial, they might give this a go, because the dry down of this reminds me a lot of kind of a musky Tonka smell I've experienced in other Guerlain fragrances. So I've sprayed it on wrist, and I have to say, they're not all that similar. They're, I suppose, within the sister style of Guerlain, but Tonka Imperial immediately is much sweeter to me, and that's why I don't really like Tonka Imperial and never went for a bottle after I heard it was discontinued. I'm really not a fan of Tonka Imperial. It's quite sweet to me, and yeah, I would say the depth, it has a little, maybe a little more depth. Again, we're talking quite a large price difference, but so that hunch wasn't quite right. And then I thought of, well, Comet has this similar almondy, musky facet that I'm getting in this Shalimar Jasmin dry down. So I sprayed that on a moment ago. And I have to say, again, it's an unfair comparison, but Comet is so much nicer to me. Less sweet, more interesting in the sort of musk blend. More, I think more well-defined. I know this is a stylistic thing and not necessarily objectively good or bad, but Guerlain really has this soft focus feel to all their fragrances. I think I said in another video, like the Barbara Walters soft focus lens where everything's a little fuzzy and hazy. And when you compare that to the Chanel, where everything feels very well defined, I just prefer that style so much more. So the Shalimar Iris, yeah, I can see why Persolaise was won over by the base, because it does have this sort of floating, pleasant, musky, hazy smell. But to me, I just wish it had some corners to it. I'm not saying it has to have anything, sharp or off-putting, but it's just so amorphous and fluffy. I'm looking for some more substance or definition there. Interestingly, I actually have not tried it on a strip until just now. I'm picking up a lot more jasmine on strip than I do skin, which is really interesting, because on skin, to me, the opening, let's say maybe there's 6 elements that I detect in the opening that make it a little more interesting. An hour later, I maybe feel like there's 2 elements or 1 element. Like, it's so very blended, it just smells like kind of one thing. And it's a pleasant thing. And this is why I say I don't regret the purchase for the price point. It doesn't smell, cheap to me. It's not overly sweet. Like I said, smelling it next to Tonka Imperial, it's almost not sweet at all. So I think for the price point, which is decent, although maybe for 50 ml it's not so decent, it does smell good. I probably like it more than regular Shalimar still, just because it's more modernized and more streamlined. But to me, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but the dry down to me really just smells like a sort of amorphous, musky, semi-sweet Tonka kind of thing. But yeah, I'm getting a lot more jasmine on the strip, so who knows, maybe my skin eats jasmine. My reference jasmine right now has to be Lutin's à la Nuit, which is just a gorgeous, green, fresh, realistic jasmine and not much else. But still, it's so perfectly executed. I really enjoy that despite its simplicity. So I suppose that's all I have to say about this. On skin, I'm asking, where's the jasmine? On strip, she shows herself. Longevity is good, as these musky things tend to last a long time, but sillage is low after the first hour or so. I found the first time I wore it, I kept wanting to respray it to get a sense of the fragrance more. It does last a while, but it becomes that sort of amorphous, wafty, musky, semi-sweet, soft focus, Guerlain kind of smell as it dries down. So a bit surprised by the way this one smells and the way it wears. A little bit disappointed, but not completely regretting having picked this up. I think it's a great kind of evening or nighttime cozy scent, and that's probably where it'll be getting most of its wear for me.